Hey everyone, Bill here, Mr. James' unpaid assistant. Sometimes to understand a really big idea, you have to understand the really big problem that created it. And that's exactly what we're doing today. We're diving into the historical chaos in ancient China that set the stage for three huge schools of thought.
So let's put you in the driver's seat. Picture this, it's 250 BCE. You're a ruler in China, and everything, everything is falling apart. You're desperate, so you ask your advisors, what should I do to rule well? To even begin to get their answers, we've got to understand the dynasty that created this mess, the Zhou. And that's spelled Z-H-O-U, but we pronounce it Zhou. Don't forget that. Okay, so let's jump in our time machine and head way back to around 1045 BCE. You've got these people, the Zhou, who just toppled the dynasty before them, the Shang. And bam! Suddenly they're in charge of this massive territory, full of all kinds of different people, who probably aren't too happy about the new management. So what's their first big problem? Legitimacy. How do you convince everybody that you are the rightful ruler? Well, you come up with a killer story. And the story they came up with? Absolutely brilliant. They called it the Mandate of Heaven. The idea was simple, but so powerful. They claimed that heaven, the ultimate cosmic force that controls everything, had handpicked them to rule. So this wasn't just a power grab, oh no, it was a sacred duty. The deal was, as long as the king was a good and just ruler, heaven would back him up.
But here's the catch, and this is super important. The mandate of heaven wasn't a blank check. It wasn't a, you're king for life no matter what kind of deal. You can almost think of it like a divine performance review. If a ruler started messing up, got corrupt, lazy, or just plain bad at the job, heaven would make its feelings known. And how? Do things like massive floods, terrible famines, devastating earthquakes. These weren't just random events, they were signs. Signs that the boss upstairs was not happy, and that the ruler had officially lost heaven's favor.
So what you get is this predictable pattern, what historians call the dynastic cycle. It starts with a new, strong dynasty taking over, claiming they've got the mandate of heaven. They bring peace, fix things up, and for a while, everything's great. But, over time, a couple generations pass, and the dynasty gets old, corrupt, and out of touch. Then the disasters start. That's the signal. The mandate is gone. And this gave the people not just the right, but pretty much the duty to overthrow the old rulers and welcome a new dynasty to start the whole cycle all over again.
All right, so the mandate of heaven is the big idea, the why behind their rule. But an idea isn't enough to actually run a kingdom this huge day to day. You need a system, a practical, on-the-ground way to keep control. And that's exactly what the Zhao came up with next.
And that system was something we call feudalism. It's actually a pretty clever management strategy when you think about it. The king, in theory, owned every single inch of land, but there's no way one guy can manage all that. So what did he do? He carved it up into big chunks and handed those chunks over to his most loyal supporters, his buddies basically. These guys were called lords.
Now these lords got the land and pretty much total control over the people living on it. But it wasn't a free gift. In exchange, they owed the king two things: soldiers for his army whenever he needed them, and their unwavering loyalty. And you know what? For hundreds of years, this system actually worked incredibly well. It created a stable, organized China.
But as we know, even the best systems have a shelf life. And that stability that was the hallmark of the Zhou dynasty, it started to crumble. And the irony is, the very system that made them so strong, feudalism, is exactly what would tear them apart.
So, after centuries of things working pretty smoothly, the cracks really start to show. By the 700s BCE, you've got a new generation of lords. These guys are powerful. They have their own land, their own armies, and their own ambitions. They started looking at the king not as their boss, but as their competition.
And it was a classic power shift. The weaker the king got, the stronger and bolder the lords became. Pretty soon, these little states started fighting amongst themselves. They formed alliances, they betrayed each other, and eventually, the whole map of China boiled down to about 7 big, powerful states, all locked in a death match for ultimate control.
This kicked off a period of just unbelievable chaos and bloodshed. We call it the Warring States period. And it wasn't a short little conflict. We're talking 250 years, 2.5 centuries of non-stop war. Everything the Zhao had built, the order, the stability, was just completely shattered.
And that brings us full circle, right back to that ruler asking for help. See, the old rulebook was useless now. The mandate of heaven, feudalism, none of it worked anymore. China was fundamentally broken. This wasn't just a political crisis, it was an intellectual one. It forced the smartest people in China to go back to the drawing board and ask,
How in the world do we fix this?
And it was right out of this total mess, out of the ashes of the Zhao dynasty, that 3 totally new ways of thinking were born. 3 philosophies that would change the world: Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism. Each one offered a completely different, radical answer to that one big question. How do you bring order back from the brink of chaos? We'll dive into their answers next time.